get in charge one more time. I mean, they were talking about cracking down on hate speech online. Like, that free speech is not hate speech. That Tim Walz guy was actually saying that.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
Hate speech. Free speech does not include hate speech. Like, what are you, by whose definition? Yours? A guy who thinks tampons should be in the boys' room?
After it's born.
Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
but
this...
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate.
From 2015 to 2023, which was the date Tim Walz repealed the law requiring life-saving care, 24 babies were born alive in Minnesota after an attempted abortion. Think of how part of this gang of ne'er-do-well criminals. And the whole movie, you know that there is a big boogeyman lurking named Kaiser Soze. And Kevin Spacey's character gets dragged into the police station early on, and they are really tough on him. They start questioning him. Chaz Palminteri does a great job of cross-examining him. And at the end of the movie, you find out that this guy doesn't have the limp he pretended to have, doesn't have like a bent hand that he pretended to have, that he's perfectly fine. He struts off into the sunset, and we learn he was the bad guy all along. And I have to tell you, Mark, that is how I'm feeling today about Tim Walz. This guy scares me.
Ever stumbled upon a political career that feels less like governance and more like an avant-garde performance piece, leaving everyone asking, what did I just witness? Buckle up, because we're diving into the curious case of Tim Walz, Minnesota's governor, whose tenure has become prime fodder for the razor-sharp critiques of commentators like Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly. It's a journey through baffling decisions, eyebrow-raising statements, and a political persona that seems to generate more questions than answers. Rogan's got the bewildered everyman take. Kelly's armed with receipts and sarcasm, and Walz? Well, Walz often seems to be operating in a reality all his own, a perplexing spectacle that has left many wondering if the script he's following was written in another language entirely. This isn't just a political analysis, it's an exploration of a phenomenon, a leader whose actions have invited a level of scrutiny and incredulity that's truly something to behold.
If that Tim Walz got into power, like if Kamala died and Tim Walz, Tampon Tim, president, you know how crazy this country would be? That weirdo who puts tampons in the boys' room. And what about our joy? Like, he's a complete pathological liar, like a complete liar. Lied about being in Tiananmen Square, lied about being a head coach of a football team.
I thought some of that was just weird and how avoidable it was.
100% avoidable, but pathological liars, people that are habitual liars, they just lie all the time about everything.
But
they bring in her, and they bring in this other guy who's radical from Minnesota. That's the vice president, who he believes a lot of wild things. One of them is transgender surgery for people who are under 13. Another one is abortion up until 9 months.
Ooh.
Yeah. He changed the Minnesota state flag to make it look like a Somali flag. That stuff scares the fuck out of people.
The story of Tim Walz, as painted by his critics, begins with a series of peculiar claims about his own past, episodes that Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly have dissected with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. There was the assertion of being present during the Tiananmen Square events in China, a detail that later required significant clarification, morphing from a dramatic eyewitness account to something far more nebulous. Then came the whispers about his time as a supposed head football coach, another biographical embellishment that seemed to unravel under scrutiny. Rogan didn't pull any punches, hinting at a pattern of behavior that felt less like an honest mistake and more like, as he put it, something akin to a pathological liar. Kelly, too, questioned the necessity of these seemingly avoidable fumbles, suggesting they were weird and entirely self-inflicted wounds. It was as if Walz was constructing a personal mythology that couldn't quite withstand the harsh light of public examination, setting a rather unsettling stage for the policy decisions that would follow. But his creative storytelling wasn't just limited to his personal history. It seemed to permeate his approach to governance itself.
Fallout continues for Tim Walz on the disastrous performance he delivered, in particular when it comes to his self-described knuckle-headed behavior. This one was that he was in China when the Tiananmen Square disaster unfolded, when hundreds of people were killed.
I have my dates wrong. I was in Hong Kong and China in 1989. That move from Hong Kong into China, it was profound for me. That was the summer of democracy. I said it's where I understood how sacred democracy was. It's what encouraged me, about 15 back and forth with my students, taking them to China. I speak like everybody else speaks. I need to be clear, I will tell you that. I do understand China a hell of a lot better than Donald Trump. Kamala Harris understands China.
The excuse for his lies, Michael, is I speak like everybody else.
And he was 100% right with Tim Walz.
Saying on my phone, I don't know, some of you know this on the iPhone, they've got that little stock app. I added Tesla to it to give me a little boost during the day. 225 and dropping.
I mean, that guy was almost the vice president of the United States. I'm sure you've seen that thing where it shows Obama saying, I need a vice president that's dumber than me.
Yeah.
And then it's Biden, and
I think
Biden
I was saying that
I
on
need
your,
a vice president dumber than me.
Great.
And it's Kamala, and Kamala saying, I need a vice president dumber than me, and it's Walz.
No, this is why
men have tampons.
Yeah.
I used to think the Democrats were crazy for saying that men have periods, but then I met Tim Walz.
And if his past narratives raised eyebrows, Walz's handling of major crises, particularly the COVID-19 pandemic, sent his critics into overdrive. Joe Rogan, never one to mince words, famously quipped that watching Walz manage the pandemic was like witnessing someone attempt brain surgery with a selfie stick, a chaotic, ill-equipped endeavor. One week, the message was stringent lockdown and dire warnings. The next, it felt like an abrupt pivot, leaving Minnesotans whiplashed and confused. Was the virus a deadly predator or an awkward party guest waiting for an invitation to leave? Walz's administration appeared to vacillate, issuing directives that often seemed contradictory or poorly communicated. Megyn Kelly, with her signature incisive sarcasm, didn't just critique the policies. She took aim at the very image of leadership Walz projected. She painted a picture of a governor fumbling through a crisis, offering platitudes while the state struggled to find its footing. It was a performance that, in her view, was less about decisive action and more about appearing to do something, anything, even if it made little sense. This chaotic approach wasn't an isolated incident. When the streets of Minnesota erupted, Walz's leadership faced its most fiery test.
Doug Brunt, my husband, he doesn't react to that much in the news. And so when it gets his attention, I know that something's gone either very right or very wrong. And he did not like this clip from Tim Walz reacting to the Taylor Swift news. Watch.
Taylor Swift signed childless cat lady. I have to get your response to that, Mr. Governor.
All those things, I am incredibly grateful, first of all, to Taylor Swift. I say that also as a cat owner, a fellow cat owner. Look, Swifties, you heard it. We know that it's there. That was eloquent, and it was clear. And that's the type of courage we need in America to stand up.
And my husband said he looks like Elmer Fudd. That's what he looks like, Elmer Fudd. Like there's something off about this guy.
The summer of 2020 saw Minneapolis become an epicenter of unrest, and Tim Walz found himself at the helm of a state in turmoil. His response, or perceived lack thereof, became a flashpoint for intense criticism. While parts of the city burned, Walz adopted what some dubbed the Captain Empathy persona, speaking of healing and listening. But for many, including commentators like Rogan and Kelly, these words rang hollow against a backdrop of escalating chaos. Joe Rogan, utterly stunned by the scenes unfolding, basically asked, "Who is this guy, and does he even go here?" It was a sentiment echoed by many who felt a distinct absence of strong, decisive leadership. Law enforcement seemed to vanish, or at least be hamstrung, leading to a situation that felt, as one particularly vivid analogy from the transcript put it, like letting a squirrel manage airport security, chaotic, nuts, and prone to darting in all the wrong directions. Megyn Kelly, watching the events, practically turned Walz into a political piñata, highlighting the disconnect between his calm rhetoric and the fiery reality on the ground. It wasn't just about the immediate crisis, it was about a broader sense of public safety seemingly unraveling. While the cities burned, Walz's economic pronouncements also drew heavy fire, often sounding more like wishful thinking than sound policy.
Radical from Minnesota. That's the vice president who he believes a lot of wild things. One of them is transgender surgery for people who are under 13. Another one is abortion up until 9 months.
Ooh.
Yeah. Obviously, there's reasons why people medically would, like, if the woman's life is in danger, if the child has something wrong, it's not going to live. There's reasons why they choose to do things like that. But that stuff scares.
Beyond the immediate crises, Walz's broader economic vision, or lack thereof, provided ample material for his detractors. There was that infamous moment where he spoke about adding Tesla to his stock app for a little boost, a comment that seemed remarkably out of touch given the economic anxieties many were facing. This, coupled with the viral meme suggesting a lineage of leaders picking successors, dumber than me, culminating with Walz, painted a picture of questionable judgment. Joe Rogan scratched his head, and Megyn Kelly practically had steam coming out of her ears when discussing policies like providing free college tuition and free health insurance for undocumented immigrants. The question they, and many taxpayers, asked was simple: who pays for all this? Does Governor Walz, as one critic mused, just draft an imaginary check from an imaginary pot of money? The perception was one of fiscal fantasy, disconnected from the realities of state budgets and taxpayer burdens. This apparent detachment wasn't just about dollars and cents. It extended to policies that seemed to prioritize ideological goals over practical concerns. But financial decisions weren't the only ones igniting controversy. Walz's stance on social issues sent shockwaves through the state.
Brand Governor Walz moderate and a representation of middle America. That's not true. He's not moderate. Driver's licenses for illegals, check. Free tuition for illegals, check. Free health insurance, free that is, for illegals, check. Who pays for that again? Does Governor Walz just like draft an imaginary check from an imaginary pot of money? Oh wait, no, it's the taxpayers. He's all for teenagers undergoing life-altering gender surgeries. And by the way, he wants to take your child away from you if you won't okay them. He supports putting tampons in the boys' bathrooms for kids as young as the 4th grade.
Indeed, Walz's foray into the culture wars became a lightning rod for criticism, with policies that Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly highlighted as deeply alarming to a significant portion of the population. The proposal to put tampons in boys' bathrooms, even for elementary school students, became a symbol of what many saw as radical overreach. Then there was his staunch support for individuals under 13 undergoing transgender surgeries and an approach to abortion that critics claimed extended up to 9 months, though proponents argued this was primarily for tragic medical necessities. These weren't minor policy tweaks. They were profound societal shifts that, as the provided transcript bluntly states, scared the shai out of people. Adding fuel to the fire was the controversial redesign of the Minnesota state flag, a move that critics, including voices amplified by Rogan and Kelly, decried as an attempt to make it resemble a Somali flag, erasing local heritage in the name of a contested vision of diversity. Walz defended these moves as empathetic and welcoming, but for many, They represented a governor pushing a divisive agenda far removed from mainstream concerns. With such polarizing policies, one might wonder how Walz communicated his vision to a deeply divided populace.
War. You didn't. Why are you saying you deployed at war? The weapons you used in war? No. You were in war. Like, oh, you were a head foot? No, you weren't a head coach. You were the water boy.
Yeah.
The fuck are you talking about?
I thought some of that was weird.
Well, he's just a liar. But that's what a lot of these people are. They're just actors who are ugly. And they're like, well, I can't really make it in show business. And I want a lot of attention. And I want to be a special person. So I'll do politics. I'm good at bullshitting.
Mm-hmm.
And most people, they're trusting. They're like, oh, he's saying the right things. If you say the right things, abracadabra. And then next thing you know, you're a fucking governor.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show. Vice President Kamala Harris delivered her closing message last night at the Ellipse in Washington, D.C. A brief, scripted, of course it was. Whose words were these? Whose thoughts were these? Whose promises were these? Speech where she urged all Americans to, quote, stop pointing fingers and start locking arms. Oh, by the way, Trump is Hitler. It's like the same as Joe Biden after he was inaugurated. I will be a unifier. I am looking for unity. Trump is Hitler. And no sooner had she ended her remarks.
If the policies themselves were controversial, Tim Walz's communication style often did little to bridge the divide, instead becoming another source of bewilderment and critique. Commentators like Megyn Kelly shredded his public speaking, comparing it to someone who swallowed a thesaurus and then forgot what the words meant, or trying to decipher poorly translated IKEA instructions. Listening to a Walz speech, they suggested, was like playing Mad Libs with a broken Etch-a-Sketch, a jumble of buzzwords like equity, innovation, and resilience that sounded impressive but often lacked concrete meaning, especially when the state faced tangible problems. Kelly's husband even likened him to Elmer Fudd, noting something off about his demeanor. This contrasted sharply with the man of the people persona Walz sometimes tried to project, seen in ads showing him in flannel, working on his car, talking about fixing cruise control. Joe Rogan seemed to view this as an act, a veneer of relatability that didn't quite match the often confusing substance of his governance. Megyn Kelly further quipped that Walz sounded like he was trying to be both Gandhi and Bob Ross while delivering bad news about recycling, leaving everyone wondering what exactly he meant. Yet, through all the gaffes and questionable policies, Walz had one consistent message, albeit an ironic one, when viewed through the lens of his critics.
Tim Walz is out there talking again.
These are bad guys, though. These are bad guys.
Did you say you could fight any Trump supporter?
Yeah, he says he kicked their ass. And
I think I could kick most of their ass. I do think that.
They're scared of him because he could fix a truck.
I think I scare them a little bit why they spend so much time on that.
They're threatened by his masculinity. I know how to fix a truck.
No, I'm serious because I can fix a truck. They know I'm not bullshitting.
Do you? I bet you don't.
How do we push some of those guys back under a rock? You don't think it's racism and misogyny?
I bet if I bring a
That message, ironically, was often about unity. Tim Walz frequently spoke of bringing people together, of fostering a one Minnesota. Yet, for critics like Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly, this rhetoric clashed spectacularly with the reality of his policies and their consequences. How, they wondered, could a leader championing such divisive social and economic measures genuinely claim to be a unifier? Rogan described it best. Walz wants to lead a kumbaya circle in the middle of a burning building. Kelly was even more direct, stating the guy couldn't unify a box of crayons. His attempts at accountability also came under fire. When challenged, Walz often seemed to perform a political two-step, blaming the previous administration, systemic complexity, or even, metaphorically speaking, Mercury being in retrograde. He had, as one critic put it, more excuses than a high schooler who forgot his homework. This perceived unwillingness to take direct responsibility, coupled with inconsistent messaging, such as on mask mandates, where rules seemed to change with the wind, painted a picture of leadership that, according to his critics, was more about dodging blame and managing appearances than delivering tangible, unifying results. So, what are we to make of the Tim Walz phenomenon, as filtered through the often scathing, always entertaining commentary of Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly? Is he a misunderstood visionary, a well-intentioned leader navigating unprecedented challenges, or something closer to the bumbling, out-of-touch figure his critics portray? The picture they paint is one of a governor whose words often seem disconnected from his actions, whose policies ignite more division than unity, and whose leadership style leaves many scratching their heads, wondering if they're watching a political leader or a character in a bewildering improv show where no one is allowed to yell "scene." Minnesota, a state rich in natural beauty and resilience, finds itself at the center of this perplexing narrative. As Rogan roasts the decisions and Kelly serves up sarcastic truths, the enduring question remains: is this the leadership Minnesota deserves, or is the state trapped in a political coloring book of contradictions, just trying not to get scribbled into oblivion? The debate, much like Walz's tenure, is far from over.
Out there to be sort of man of the people, you know, in his flannel and like a real regular working class guy, like a teacher you can relate to. And the latest effort was him this weekend, like working on his car. He's just like a guy who works on the car and kicks the engine around. Here is a bit of an ad. This is an ad showing him working on this car. Watch.
Everything works on here, except one thing I'm still tinkering with, cruise control. So I'm gonna show you how to fix that. At the same time, we talk about creating an opportunity economy so that...
He believes a lot of wild things. One of them is transgender surgery for people who are under 13.
So for those out there who are wondering, aren't there something else you could be doing or it doesn't seem to impact you in your life? This is what it means to show empathy. This is what it means to be welcoming.
He changed the Minnesota state flag to make it look like a Somali flag. You haven't seen that?
But our current flag is problematic. I think we all know that. We've evolved into a more diverse state, and I think it's more reflective of that.